how much more of a test is this Northwestern team than what Oregon's already faced? Because it really feels like, it is a Big Ten team, it's a Power 4 team, and they're, setting up that advancement, but it really still does not feel like this should be a challenge for these Ducks.
Yeah, Northwestern is a program that has found success at times here and there throughout the last, 2 decades or so, but typically sits near the bottom of the Big Ten and looks to probably find themselves around there going forward this season. Um, just they don't have a very talented roster. It's similar situation to a school like Purdue where they just don't really bring in those 4 and 5 star prospects, and a team like Oregon does year after year. The line is similar to where it was for those first couple of games for Oregon, nearly 30 points. So I don't know if we'll expect quite the same Oregon trying to like run up the score like they did to Oklahoma State. It felt a little personal there. We heard Dante Moore's comments about Dan Lanning being like his dad, and Mike Gundy saying those things, feeling like it's tackling a family member. So they tried to run things up a little bit on Oklahoma State. I don't know if they'll do that to Northwestern necessarily, but it'll be good to get the experience of going on the road, I think. But I don't know about how much on the field is going to test this Oregon team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this team. Preston Stone threw 4 picks against Tulane. We can just take you through. They lost 23-3, headed down to the Big Easy. At Tulane, that wasn't a great game for them. They came home 142-7 over Western Illinois, but that doesn't, particularly feel like it proves anything for this team that really just, like you said, lacks the talent to really fight with the team like Oregon. I was curious because I'm pulling some stats from them. They're a very, very pass heavy team. Part of that's because they're playing from behind so often. But 41% is close to what we saw from the Seahawks last year with Ryan Grubb. I said I wanted to see the secondary tested more. Does that feel like something that will, really challenge these guys in the back end, or is it just going to be like short passes and stuff that will just more challenge the linebackers?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more of a challenge to the linebackers and to rallying to tackle and stuff like that than anything over the top. We saw Preston Stone be pretty solid in that game against Western Illinois, 245, 3 touchdowns for him in that one. But again, you're playing Western Illinois, team that Illinois beat by an even worse score in week 1. So you haven't really seen much from Preston Stone. He's a guy that can make some rash decisions at time, like we saw at Tulane. I think Oregon could end up taking advantage of him in a similar way they did to Zane Flores in this game. He's a more experienced guy than Flores, and he'll be at home instead of on the road. But I think Oregon just has superior talent, on the defensive front to go get after him with the pass rush, and then the receivers just are not as talented as Oregon's cornerbacks and their safeties and stuff like that. So I think Oregon should comfortably be able to turn this in a game where Northwestern is trying to pass because they kind of have to in a way that Oklahoma State did, but they really can't get anything going, and will lead to a lot of 3-and-out and quick possessions getting back to the Oregon offense.
Yeah, I mean, the big benefit of this one for the Ducks is that they get to go on the road, and they get to go on the road before they go to State College. This is, it's important to note that this is not Northwestern's traditional stadium. They're playing on the lake here, in their converted soccer stadium. It's about 12,000 seats for them. But, we still want to see more in the defense and everybody really performing those quick change, high pressure situations. Not that that's going to happen, but this is not going to be a crowd like Autzen where they're behind these guys. They're going to quiet down, and they're feeling, it's 12,000 people, but it's still going to be a tough spot. Now, I'm excited to see how they sit there where, how important is the fact that they get on the road before they have to go to Penn State?
I think just the test of being on the road and not having those comforts of home are where that test really lies, more in terms of than the environment you're going to be going into, like it would be like it is going to be in Penn State. Chicago's not going all the way to the East Coast, but it's it's a 4-hour flight from Eugene. It's real Big Ten territory out in the Midwest. So I think that is still a legitimate road trip. Everybody's going to have to get on the plane and figure out, how those routines go with the travel. So, and then playing at 9 a.m. is going to be interesting too. 9 a.m. local time here in Eugene. It'll be an 11 a.m. like big noon kickoff out in Chicago. So, I think just the experience of getting to operate your walkthroughs and all the game prep in a week where you're not going to be at home the whole time, I think is what's going to be most valuable to them. So we'll see how these things go, because it's literally about 1/10 of the amount of people as you're going to see up in the stands when they go to Penn State.
It's kind of crazy to think about. I want to drill down a little bit here on the secondary when we preview this. Northwestern, like we said, 60% almost of those plays across these first 2 weeks have been passing plays. And the Ducks went a little bit more to cover two in that, or not the Oregon State game, the Oklahoma State game. Is that something you think they'll see again in this game? Is that how you confront this and sit with those guys high, or are you? We talked about how the linebackers are going to operate in this one. Do you go back to what the Ducks really feel comfortable with?
I think it just depends on how this game kind of plays out early on. We'll see. I have to dive into more of Northwestern's film later this week to get into how much they are going to try to attack downfield, because Oklahoma State was a team that certainly wanted to do that, and we're looking to find those shots down the sideline. So Oregon ended up lining up with a lot of 2 high safety looks, even went to some 3 safety looks where Kingston Lopa or Dylan Thieneman would kind of, in a similar way to what Oregon saw from Ohio State last year in the Rose Bowl, where Caleb Downs was lurking in the middle in a Tampa 2, where it's more of less of a cover 2 and almost a cover 3. Normally you have like a middle linebacker who has to get very far back for that middle third responsibility. And instead they're using a guy like Thieneman or Kingston Lopa in that kind of over about 10 yards or so off the center over in the middle of the field. We'll see how those things work out at Northwestern. It's a team that will want to throw the ball, but I don't know how much that's going to be downfield. So it's going to be a lot more like I said, rallying to the ball and being able to make those tackles. Oklahoma State wanted to test Oregon vertically. You saw some of those shots early on, and then Dylan Thieneman, able to get to the sideline and break those up. And once the momentum kind of got to Oregon's side, and those kind of really shut down. But like you said, going to be interesting to see how this plays out throughout the secondary when you do have a team that does like to pass the ball as frequently as Northwestern does.
Yeah, and that spot next to Thieneman was kind of one of the biggest question marks coming into the season. We had guys who we felt like were going to be comfortable there. We're 2 weeks in. Where do we stand with? Because Kingston Lopa was a guy who was really in there. He came down and really hit a guy on one play from the middle of that, and that was what really stood out to me. Where do we stand with Lopa and Flowers and all these guys who really could fit into that spot next to Dylan?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this continues to play out, but it seems like Flowers is that guy next to Thieneman. He started both of those games, played the majority of the snaps. They're moving Thieneman around a lot, which I think is interesting to see. He was a guy that when he was at Purdue succeeded really, really well as a single high safety or as a 2 high safety, being able to range over the top. And we saw that closing speed to break up one of those early passes from Oklahoma State, but they were moving him a lot more into the slot, into the box, more as a traditional strong safety throughout that Oklahoma State game, even more so than they did in week 1 against Montana State. And then Flowers has been the primary guy over the top, as a more traditional roaming free safety. But we'll see how this works out. Lopa's been in kind of a specialized role. He's over the top the least out of all of Oregon's safeties right now. He's either in the slot, in the box. They want his size to be able to impact things closer to the line of scrimmage, and we've seen it make an impact. And he's been used in those specialized kind of roles before. Where last year in the Big Ten championship game, they used him specifically because he is 6'5" and because he brings size that not most safeties do. So they used him to cover Tyler Warren in that game. I think we'll continue to see him using that specialized role, and then Woodyard seems like the true backup to Thieneman right now as the strong safety. His snap counts look pretty similar to Thieneman in terms of his usage between different areas of the field. And obviously we saw him being in, not necessarily making a play because he didn't, the kind of pass went right to him, but being in the right spot. That when pressure was in Zane Flores' face, he just threw it right to Peyton Woodyard, and he was able to pick 6 that one.